The Secrets of Star Trek is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. And today we're discussing the Voyager first season episode, Faces. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today on the panel are Jimmy Akin. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
And Father Cory Sticha. Hi, Father Cory.
How's it going?
Very good. And Merry Christmas to you both.
Likewise.
Merry Christmas to you as well.
As our listeners...
And to the listeners.
And to the listeners, yes. As our listeners receive this, that's Christmas just passed. So we are now in the Christmas season. And as a wonderful Christmas present to your friends and family, you could share this podcast with them. It's just a cheap promotional gimmick there. But please share the podcast with your Trek-loving friends. Help us grow this wonderful community that we've got here and to help us reach more listeners. I want to mention another show that you're going to love on the StarQuest Network called The Secrets of Doctor Who, where the three of us talk about Doctor Who. And perfect timing, the New Year's special of Doctor Who is about to drop, and then we're going to talk about it right afterward. So check it out if you have any interest in Doctor Who at all. If you're just getting started, now's a great time to start listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who. You can find it wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/Doctor Who. So we are talking this time about the Star Trek Voyager first season episode called Faces, which is the 14th production number, although the first two episodes were a double episode. But it's the 14th episode of this first season. And Jimmy, can you give us a recap of this?
This week, Kirk beams down to a really cold planet, but when he beams back up, he's accidentally split into two people, one good, one evil. Oh, sorry, wrong Star Trek series. This week on Voyager, Janeway murders Tuvix by using a transporter to split him into two people, one Tuvok, one Neelix. Guess that's the wrong episode. This week on the episode Faces, a Vidian doctor murders B'Elanna using a medical transporter to split her into two people, one Klingon, one human. He does this because he thinks Klingons may have super COVID-resistant genes, but he needs a pure Klingon specimen to test his theory. So he infects Klingon B'Elanna with the phage, and she fights it off, and he was right about that. But he kills a newly introduced, never-to-be-seen-again Starfleet officer and grossly grafts his face onto his own in an attempt to seduce Klingon B'Elanna. So she attacks him and escapes. Meanwhile, human B'Elanna is acting like the emotionally fragile good Kirk and has to learn courage without her Klingon genes. Meanwhile, Chakotay impersonates a Vidian and infiltrates their underground base to help with the escape. In the end, Klingon and human B'Elanna earn each other's respect. True, they do have interpersonal conflict over issues like who has a bad temper, who is weak, who acts without thinking, and who refuses to act at all. But in the end, there is only one solution. B'Elanna must act together. But creepy Vidian doctor reemerges and fatally wounds Klingon B'Elanna. After the escape, the doctor says human B'Elanna needs the Klingon DNA to survive. Duh. And begins plans to resaddle human B'Elanna with her Klingon heritage. The end.
I do want to point out, by the way, that Durst does show up in one previous episode, Cathexis, which was, I think, the one just before this.
Right before this. Yeah, right. Right before this.
Which is why I said newly introduced rather than never before seen.
That's right. That's right. So a little bit of background on this episode, and thank you for that excellent recap, Jimmy. That covers it pretty well. A lot of the writers in the writer's room of Voyager apparently didn't want to do this story. They thought that the evil twin idea was tired, which it is, and why go right on the nose for the thing that makes B'Elanna so interesting? I thought that was interesting in and of itself, that they opposed this, and I think they were right. I think there are elements of this that are an interesting story, but right off the bat in the first season, going right to the B'Elanna's twin sides thing was a little bit on the nose for the character. What do you guys think of that?
I think it could have been more interesting if it was more than one episode. You know, if they would have introduced the Klingon side and the human side and played around with it for a while instead of, oh, by the way, we got to go back to status quo because medical reasons.
Right. Because that's how we do it. Yeah.
Yeah. As thinking from a writing perspective, I would be inclined, I would have been, I wouldn't have done it this soon. And I would have been inclined to make either a permanent character change or and this is just thinking as a writer, not thinking in terms of how would the fans react.
Yep.
But thinking as a writer, I would be interested in seeing like Klingon B'Elanna dies and that's it. And we've got human B'Elanna from here on out, and she has to learn to deal with the fact that she's part of a person and she's radically different now than she used to be. And maybe she's haunted by the ghost of her Klingon self and even has conversations with it, you know, even if it's just a memory or something. So I would make it an ongoing concern and eventually find some way, and maybe at some point reintroduce her Klingon genes. But I would be inclined to make it a more complex, longer lasting story.
Yeah, that would be that. And if, again, in a modern context, that's probably how they would do it.
I don't know. Modern Star Trek does lots of stuff I wouldn't advise from a writing perspective.
Right. I'm thinking more of like a modern show. If it were like that's the sort of thing that a show today would do, because this was much more episodic than a lot of shows are today.
Something Babylon 5 would have done.
Definitely. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. So I like that idea better. It would have been a more interesting show.
For what they did, I actually think this could have been a lot worse.
Yes.
There are paint by numbers aspects to the writing. Of course, Klingon B'Elanna is going to behave this way. Of course, human B'Elanna is going to behave that way. But they establish a reasonable balance. And it's better and softer than like the good Kirk, bad Kirk thing from the original series.
Yeah.
I mean, it's okay to go that broad the first time you do it, but if this had been that broad with just violent, irrational B'Elanna and timid, compassionate B'Elanna that was just a knockoff of the two Kirks, it's like, okay, that has been done.
Yeah.
Here, they at least softened it and changed the dynamic and have the two characters working together constructively.
And I'll give credit. I'll give credit to Roxanne Dawson for that. I mean, she played both, very, very different characters. They're both very different characters from the normal B'Elanna character to begin with, and she can play that contrast and, play it where it is not quite as extreme as like the Kirk character, because of course, William Shatner isn't exactly what you would call a good actor, in my opinion, but anyways,
at least a subtle
I said it. I said it.
Subtle one.
Yeah. No, I think she did, a great job playing these two very different characters that were very different from the main character. So give her credit for that.
Apparently she was freaked out by the script when she first got it. Like, oh my gosh, what are you doing to me? I'm not sure I can do this. So yeah, give her credit for that.
Now, you mentioned the character Durst, who's played by Brian Markinson. He's the one who gets his face ripped off and spliced onto the Vidian Doctor. He also plays the Vidian Doctor to make that easier.
Yeah.
But if you recognize him, he's been in a bunch of other stuff. He's been in other Star Trek series. You may remember him from DS9. He was he played Dr. Geiger, who is obsessed with immortality in the Lions and Geigers and Bears episode.
Oh my.
Which was the one set just on the eve of the Dominion War, where Jake really wants to buy a baseball card for his father, and they have to go through these elaborate procedures that expose them to the crazy conspiracy theories of Dr. Geiger. Also on Stargate SG-1, he played Lotan. And so he's been around the sci-fi franchises.
Oh, right. Yeah, he is very recognizable. So yeah, that's true. Now I'm thinking about that, Lotan. Another thing I want to mention was about the Vidians. So Michael Piller was one of the producers on the show, and you'd say he had the most influence on Voyager in as a whole. He told the scriptwriter, who was, by the way, a new scriptwriter, like she had been an intern before she picked up this episode. And he told her that one of Gene Roddenberry's maxims was, don't make the villains patently evil, evil mustache twirling bad guys, but make them people whose values and motivations may differ, but who are seeking what they perceive as their own good. And I have to say,
because that's what you need to do with villains.
Right. Mm-hmm. To make them believable or even relatable.
In any series, yeah.
Right.
When a villain looks in the mirror, they don't see a villain.
Right. Exactly. I mean, yeah, without getting into other things. But yeah, and I feel like with the Vidians here, like that, and especially with Sulan, yeah, I mean, from his point of view, I'm saving my people, I'm doing a good, sure, some sacrifices have to be made, Durst, but we're working here. We're gonna save lives here. So it's kind of it becomes a more interesting character in that. So I like that.
So the Vidians are infected by this plague called the phage. Mm-hmm. And to deal with it, they have to splice body parts from all these different alien species onto themselves. So they can conduct successful xenoplasty with species from other planets. Mm-hmm. And they can't cure a single pathogen that is native to their own species.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's not scientifically plausible.
Yeah.
Another scientific implausibility is if you had a person who had and somehow Klingon and human DNA could work together, which it never could in reality, but if it could, if you had a person and you took their genome apart and made two copies, two people out of a single genome, you wouldn't get two perfectly specied otherwise identical people. Because so in the case of humans, which B'Elanna is half, you have half of your DNA from your mother and half of your DNA from your father. So B'Elanna has a human father and a Klingon mother. So in order to make a fully human person and a fully Klingon person out of B'Elanna, you'd have to take her dad's DNA and put it together twice to make a human. And you'd have to take her mother's DNA and put it together twice to make a Klingon. But if you took a normal person and took out their father's DNA and doubled it, and their mother's DNA and doubled it, they would not look like twins.
Right.
Mm-mm.
They also wouldn't look identical to mom or dad either. They would look like some kind of sibling. And they would think like siblings, and they would, they would not be this like identical enough to be played by the same actress.
Now, I mean, an argument, if you want to try to give this even the benefit of the doubt, is, okay, so you take the part of the DNA that's human and you fill in with a typical human DNA, quote unquote, and you take the part that came from the Klingon and you fill in with typical Klingon DNA. I mean, first of all, again, as you state, Jimmy, that's absolutely implausible, completely implausible. But also, this isn't the Alpha Quadrant. They don't have Klingons running around the Delta Quadrant. How would he know what typical Klingon DNA would be to begin with? I mean, the human, you could argue, well, he's seeing the Voyager crew and he's probably gotten scans from other Vidians of what humans look like DNA wise. But it's so, I mean, yeah, on many, even if you want to give them the credit for, they could fill in the blanks because this is the 24th century and.
Yeah. Also, they would be new people and this wouldn't transfer their memories. It just transfer their genes.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's the problem with transporter splitting and splicing. It's wrong. Mm-hmm. Don't do it. It was wrong when they did the original series. It was wrong here, and it was very wrong with Tuvix, and don't ever do it again.
Yeah. Incidentally, we never see the transport process, but at one point, Dr. Fauci tells B'Elanna that he used a matter to energy process as part of all this.
Yeah. You call it the genetron.
Yeah.
But we'll give them the science fantasy that they've got going here about how it gets done because it's Star Trek. There is a lot of effective horror, gothic, body horror stuff going on in this episode.
The Durst face thing that is horror. That is horrible body horror.
That is right up there with Silence of the Lambs. I mean, that was pretty gruesome.
Oh, man.
For a Star Trek, for a show that kids watch, that's a pretty heavy duty thing they did there.
Could you put some lotion on that face, maybe?
Oh, man. It was...
Well, I mean, and just the whole fact that he did it because, frankly, he was hitting on her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he also tells her, and it'll save 12 lives. It's like, I don't care. That is freaking disturbing.
Yeah.
Creepy scientist is creepy.
Right. I thought you'd find this face a little more comforting because, the Vidians just as a whole, as a villain, are among the ones I found the creepiest in Star Trek anyway. I mean, they're really creepy. I have to say, I'm a little... I get the idea of like human B'Elanna lacking courage and strength thing because
all Starfleet officers do.
Well, that's the problem. Is like she's human. That doesn't. As human beings, we don't necessarily lack courage and strength. I get what you're trying to say. Is she's been so reliant on the Klingon version of that the absence of it, she feels much less. I don't know. It just seems a stretch.
The more plausible way to play it is being split like this is an extremely traumatic event, and she is experiencing a conversion reaction.
Right.
She's having to adjust to a dramatically new situation psychologically after trauma, and she's folding in on herself to deal with it.
Well, right. I mean, because you look at later on when she's magically understanding all the Vidian computer systems despite not actually ever using them before or knowing the language natively.
Yeah.
Also, now she's not afraid anymore because she's in her comfort zone of, understanding a strange computer terminal that she's never used before.
Which seems to happen a lot. They do kind of have this misdirection at first where we're led to believe that the human part of B'Elanna is just thrown away. That we only see the Klingon B'Elanna until the human B'Elanna shows up in the prison barracks with Paris.
They don't say that, so I think that's a matter of inference, but they do wait a long time to introduce human B'Elanna.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like that was like an intentional idea to kind of surprise us in the second act.
Yeah, it's like I've seen Star Trek before. I'm not going to be surprised with human B'Elanna coming in.
Yeah, exactly. So what was the other thing?
And we got, generic cave structure number 3 that they're mining in, because of course you got to have that too, where Paris and Durst before his face is ripped off, are being used as slaves because we've never seen that before in science fiction.
Stereotypical slave mine, yes, that we have to do.
At least they do establish, and in reality, you'd have robots doing that for you. I mean, in the future. We had human slaves in the past. We're going to have robot slaves in the future. That's what humanity does.
Right.
Every culture over the world.
Or holograms, as we find out later.
Or holograms, yeah. But they do have an interesting twist this time, which is the tunnels change shape, which is why they can't just go in and find them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's a little bit of, I just got to mention, Neelix in the first season is so annoying. I know. He's annoying in all seasons, but he's especially annoying
in this episode than in many.
Well, because there's less Neelix,
for like
right?
5 minutes. Well, you see him for like 5 minutes, so.
Well, the thing that gets me with him is like this whole I'm making comfort food for Tuvok thing, and it's like he's annoyed. The thing that gets me about Neelix is the whole relationship with Tuvok is you would be a better person if you were less Vulcan. And it annoys me because it sort of is the way that extroverts treat introverts. Introverts are flawed people because they're not more extroverted. And I guess maybe that's what I'm seeing is like Tuvok just wants to be left alone and let him be Vulcan. No, well, you're only good if you are more emotional.
Did I don't know that I got from Neelix that he was judging Tuvok to be flawed because he was too Vulcan.
He's always trying to get him to open up.
Not in this episode.
Well, like for example, he makes him the plummy soup, but it was too bland, so I had to spice it up.
Right, and that was him being clueless.
Yeah,
right.
I just feel like that's sort of the way Neelix operates, and I guess it's just he's just sort of clueless. But it's kind of
it's that contrast of Neelix as Mr. Emotion and feeling and got to make everybody feel good and jealousy and all that versus Tuvok, who's the stereotypical Vulcan.
Yeah. Other things, Chakotay going undercover. I was thinking, actually, it would be easier to go undercover as a Vidian because it's not like they could recognize you, which comes up, well,
Why haven't I seen you before? My face was just changed again. Oh, okay.
Like that security must be difficult as anything at these Vidian facilities.
Let's run a DNA scan. Oh, wait.
Yeah. Do they have this ship of Theseus problem with Vidians at any point? I mean,
I think there's got to be a core in there that remains, but it doesn't have to be a big core. Probably just neural matter.
Yeah.
And not even all of that.
Yeah, just the brain has to be the same. So at the end, like you mentioned that we've got this. The doctor says we have to change you back because plot reasons tell us that she needs a Klingon DNA to survive.
Well, she would. I mean, suppose you have a wolf and a dog, and which is way closer than human and Klingon.
Yeah.
And you breed a wolf dog, and then you yank all the wolf DNA out and just double the dog DNA. That thing very well may not survive.
Yeah.
Because that wolf DNA was doing stuff. And if you yank out stuff and just double what's there, it may not work, especially, and the bigger the difference between species, the more of a problem that's going to be.
But it's not like none of this is possible, but it's not like you're pulling the DNA out of individual cells and shoving them over there. You're basically reconstituting a person from the DNA. I mean, that's what you would have to be doing. It just, it doesn't bear thinking too much about it, I guess, but it just doesn't work. This whole idea. I hate when they do this.
Tell you what else doesn't work is the reappearance of the ridiculous wrist flashlights that they have while they're going around the tunnels.
Yeah.
Those things are completely implausible. So if you haven't seen Voyager in a while, they have, whenever they go into a subterranean cave environment, which they do a lot. They have these flashlights that are stuck to their wrists. And so what you have to do, instead of having the flashlight in your hand, which is designed to articulate things so you can swiftly point it around without having to move your whole freaking arm, they've got to wave their whole freaking arm around and to point the flashlight where they want to go. And it's absolutely ridiculous. I also noticed that Tuvok is wearing, he's got the flashlight on one wrist and his phaser is on the opposite hip. So what that would mean is because you can't easily twist one arm around to get the phaser on that hip.
It's a cross draw.
It's a cross draw. So he would have to use his flashlight arm to grab the phaser and pull it out and point it. And in all of that, he's just taken the light off of whatever it is that's attacking him.
Yes.
And it's just completely implausible. Now, plausibility would have, by the 24th century, they're going to have little drones with lights on them.
Yeah.
We have drones with little lights on them today.
That follow you around even.
Follow you around and follow your gaze and point it where your gaze is, and also look out for additional danger. And so if you see the light shift to something you're not looking at, that would be a sign I better look over there to see what the sensor has picked up. I mean, we are on the verge of doing that now. Probably the military has that now. So these wrist flashlights are just absolutely absurd. But I hate them. I hate them a lot.
This is one case where I will give Discovery credit. They have tactical suits that they wear in situations like this. You can put the lights on the suit, on a vest.
Yeah, and you can't, exactly, you can't do anything effectively with the hand that's got the flashlight attached to the wrist, because you've got to be waving that around instead of doing something else with it.
You hold your tricorder there. Oh.
So, anything left to say on this episode, Father Cory?
Glad it was as short as it was. The only thing is the whole issue of the planet shifting without any kind of actual like earthquakes or whatever. That should have been a clue that there was more going on here than just this is a strange planet. But
right. Jimmy?
So there was a scene in this in which human B'Elanna is talking about her childhood othering issues, where like she was the only, she and her mom were the only people with Klingon heritage in this colony they were on, and then her dad took off when she was 5 years old, and she tried to hide her ridges and stuff as a child to fit in with other kids, and all of that, it rings true. Kids do experience things like that. Adults experience things like that. And all of that was interesting and nice character, development, not development exactly, but character background for B'Elanna. I liked that. I liked that her father was flawed in this situation. That's what all this is not consistent with, because all that's consistent with human nature. What all that is not consistent with is Gene Roddenberry, where by this century, people aren't supposed to have those flaws. And it's nice to see that, no, they do. And that's peeking through the Gene Roddenberry facade because it makes for better storytelling and more interesting characters.
Yes.
I did forget one more thing I wanted to mention. Jonathan Glassner is listed as one of the writers. He pitched the idea for this episode. He's better known as one of the co-developers of Stargate SG-1, which you can hear about in Secrets of Stargate.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, this was predating that by a couple of years.
His name is Jonathan
Glassner.
Glassner? Okay. Not Albert Glasser, the famous, infamous movie score composer for Burt Gordon movies. Okay.
Nope.
Different Glasser. All right. I think that should do it for this time. We do want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Star Trek, including Jody F., Brian S., Bob L., Jun C., and Leonidas S. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. We'd also like to thank Victor Lambs, who edits the show for us every week. So that's it from us. What did you think of this Voyager episode, Faces? You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/trek, or our Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, or send an email to trek@sqpn.com. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the Enterprise episode, Fusion. Until then, Father Cory Sticha, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Star Trek.
Thank you, Dom.
And Jimmy Akin, thank you as well.
This fusion thing isn't going to involve a transporter and putting two people together, is it?
Oh, I sure hope not. And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest. And remember, I must point out that if you take the liberty of changing a time-honored recipe, you are hardly presenting a taste of home, which I understand completely. Hi, everyone. This is Dom Bettinelli, CEO of StarQuest, with a special message as we approach the Christmas season. This past year, the StarQuest network has continued to expand our mission of exploring the intersection of faith and pop culture through our many entertaining and informative programs. Now we need your generous financial support to reach new audiences with more of the life-changing and uplifting programming we've been creating for more than a decade. That's why it's very important that we hear from you this Advent and Christmas, the time when nonprofits receive most of their support for the year. If you are already a supporter of StarQuest, we thank you and ask you to prayerfully consider increasing your support at this time. If you're not yet a supporter, please become one now. Every gift counts. Could you give $15 or even just $10 per month? Whatever level of support you can offer, please show your support for SQPN this Christmas. And remember that your gifts may be tax deductible. Just go to sqpn.com/give. That's sqpn.com/give. May God bless you this Advent, and may you have a blessed Christmas season.